Hello, my name is Jennifer Bingham. I am the Library Services Coordinator at the King's University, and I'm welcoming you today to a student success workshop on plagiarism. Now, it may not be the most exciting topic in the world, but it is very important, and it's a topic that if we're familiar with will keep us safe and happy, and the students around us productive and learning and happy citizens of the scholastic community. All right, I am going to share a PowerPoint today, and that information comes from the Student Success textbook written by Catherine Harrington, and I'm taking a look at the third edition. It's a fantastic resource that we use as a textbook in our student success undergrad course here at the King's University. And there's a copy available for you to look at on reserve in the library. So come and take a look if you would like more information. I'm going to share a PowerPoint from this very class, which I have found useful in my class. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is called academic integrity. You should be familiar with this topic because every single syllabus in the King's University, everyone we release, has an academic integrity clause, or it's known as our standard of academic integrity. And what, you may ask, is academic integrity? Well, it's academically honest behaviors. And it involves doing your work without using unapproved aids and creating your own academic product, such as a paper or presentation, while giving appropriate credit to those who shaped and influenced your work. And quite honestly, it's very important to the King's University to have academic integrity, even more than your general secular university would be, because we're supposed to be the salt and the light to the world. And if we can't do that at seminary, at a Bible college that is centered on Christ, then where can we do it? So you are held to even higher standard than even a regular university would be. All right, so I'll explain it this way. Our professors, such as Dr. Hunsinger, they don't actually create things like, say, a chair. A carpenter may produce chairs and then sell those chairs to you. Now, you would probably never claim that that chair that's in your dining room was made by you and came from you. But with ideas, it's a little harder. Yet, Dr. Hunsinger is a person who deals in ideas. God gives him ideas, and those ideas, just like the chair to the carpenter, become his property. It's called intellectual property, and it's a very real thing. Those ideas were given to him by God, and that is his livelihood. He owns those ideas. He uses them. He speaks on them, and that's how he makes income. That's how he makes money. So it would not be very good of us to take those ideas and use those ideas without giving credit to the person that God gave them to originally. So whenever we use Dr. Hunsinger's ideas, we need to credit Dr. Hunsinger because that's his intellectual property. And this is important to universities because if we aren't academically integrous, then eventually the university will get a reputation, and it may end up being negative for the students that go there. It is not a victimless crime. If an institution gets too bad of a reputation, then outside learning opportunities for students may be reduced, employment opportunities may be reduced. It's a very serious matter. So please keep in mind not only your future opportunities, but also those of your fellow students. It's important that we remain of good repute. Even the Bible talks about how we need to be integrous and how we need to be as good repute as just Christians, because it's a good witness to those around us. So let's guard our reputation and our witness. Also, I'm going to explain what the definition of plagiarism is. And it's very simply presenting someone else's work as your own. But there's a little aside. Not only can it be presenting someone else's work as your own, but also you can plagiarize yourself. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you can plagiarize yourself. Also, it's important to cite yourself, but I'll go into this a little bit further later on. So some examples of plagiarism. Let's talk about it. Putting your name on work, entire papers or small sections that someone else created. So a simple example would be another student writes a paper. You simply take that paper off the internet and put your name on it. That would be plagiarism. Also, plagiarism is using quotation marks when not using quotation marks when using another person's work. So in other words, you're reading along in Dr. Hunsinger's book and you're like, that's a wonderful sentence. That's a great idea. Dr. Hunsinger, good job. You go ahead and you take that sentence, you put it in your paper, but you don't put quotation marks around it and you don't cite it. That would be plagiarism. Also, changing a few, now this is a big one that a lot of students do and don't even realize it's plagiarism. You may be reading along in Dr. Hunsinger's book and you find a sentence that really sums up what you're trying to say. You take that sentence and you put it in your paper, but you don't want to plagiarize. So what you do is you change a few words around. So you change maybe approval to say certification, and then maybe you put the subjugated clause around in the front instead of the end where he originally had it. Since you changed it, that means it's not plagiarism, right? No, it's still plagiarism, and it's also incorrect paraphrasing. So we'll talk about that a little later too, but don't be guilty of this. We cannot just take a sentence out of a book, change a few words, and throw it in our papers. That's plagiarism. Paraphrasing the idea of another person and not citing the source is also plagiarism. And finally, you can self-plagiarize. Submitting the same paper or work in two different classes without the professor's approval is referred to as self-plagiarism. So in other words, if you write a paper in one class, and then later on, you're taking another class completely, and the professor calls for you to write a paper on what is essentially the same topic as you studied in your first class 3 semesters ago. Well, can I just use the paper I wrote 3 semesters ago? It's the same topic. And no, you can't. What I would suggest is you talk to your professor and see if you can't use some of the same ideas. Talk to him or her about how you might add on to the ideas you already wrote about and produce essentially a new paper founded on your original paper. Also, what you can do is you can actually cite yourself, which is kind of fun. So you would go and you could use a sentence or a paragraph that you wrote already in the previous paper, but you have to put a citation on the end that is essentially your own citation, and that would be a citation of an unpublished paper, and you can find that information of how to cite that properly in your manual for your style guide. All right, and we also want to look at cheating. What is cheating? Cheating is engaging in any activity that gives you or another student an unfair advantage. That means an advantage that the other students in the class might not have. So what are some examples of cheating? Well, using unapproved materials or resources when completing an assignment or exam would be an example of cheating. Working collaboratively, that means working together as students on a project that the professor originally intended for you to do on your own. An example of this is one time a group of students came into the library and said, our professor assigned us 50 citations, bibliographic citations, and we all have to write out these 50 citations. Would it be okay if the 5 of us split up and did 10 each and then just put that work together? And while that does sound a lot easier, no, it's not all right. You actually have to ask your professor if that would be all right. Ask if his original intent was for you to do all 50 on your own, because essentially you're not learning as much as you would if you did it on all 50 on your own. So always ask your professor when in doubt. Also, an example of cheating is discussing exam content with another student who hasn't taken the exam yet. A lot of our classes are reoccurring. And sometimes, since writing a valid test can be a little challenging, you don't realize it until you actually do it. Writing tests can be hard. And writing tests that are fair can be even more challenging. So sometimes the professors like to just reuse the test again if it's one that worked out well with the class before. So it would be cheating for a student who took the class in the fall to actually share information on that test with a student later on in following semesters. All right. So how can we maintain our academic honesty, our academic integrity? Well, here are some ways you can do it. It's been said in studies in the Miller, Shoptot, and Woodridge study of 2011 that students who care about learning are more likely to engage in honest behaviors. When you are studying, it should be your prime motivation to learn. You are here to be prepared for your mission in life. And you are, as the scripture says, to do your work as unto the Lord. So if you were doing your work, even school work, as unto the Lord, you would want to be integritous and to do everything perfectly and with excellence. So it is your job to care about learning, which is the point of studying at the King's University. And an added benefit of that is you, if your prime motivation is learning and not just grades, that you actually learn more and you tend to be more academically integrous. All right, another way to be academically honest is to prepare well for tests and use good time management. Honestly, plagiarism happens a lot of times just because we are doing things last minute. It is 11 p.m. and this thing is due at midnight and you have not started yet. So you work really fast, you get sloppy, and you don't complete things with the excellence that you would have otherwise done. So please keep that in mind. Try to work as early as possible. Don't put things off to the last minute. And always, ladies and gentlemen, when you are writing your papers, even if you don't want to put a full footnote in at the end of any paraphrase or any direct quotation, always put the last name of the source, author, and the page number. Word to the wise, because if you don't, you are going to go back through that paper. You are not going to remember what is your own brilliant work and what is a quoted work, because it'll all look the same to you. And because you're such a good writer, you won't be able to tell the difference between your own good work and, say, another person's good work. Also, you will not be able to cite it properly anyway, even if you do recognize it, because you'll have to look through that whole book to find that one sentence that you were trying to cite. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, it takes a lot more time to try to correct those mistakes later than it does to just simply type in the last name of the author and the page number while you're working through it the first time. I've never done that before. Okay. Also, learning about academic integrity and how to effectively cite sources can help you avoid unintentional dishonesty. Ladies and gents, if you know how to use your Turabian well, if you watch videos that are produced by Student Success or by the library on these different citation styles, if you come and ask questions to the library staff or Student Success staff and learn how to effectively use these citation styles, you are less likely to be dishonest and to commit plagiarism. So please ask questions and ask them frequently. Do not be afraid to ask the questions. Learn. And finally, don't forget to seek out help when needed. As I just said, seek it out. We're all here to help you. You are not on your own. You are not alone in this journey. You have people that God has called to be around you and mentoring you and walking you along through this journey. But we can't know what your questions are if you don't ask. So you must ask. And one of the great things about the King's University is the class teacher to student ratio is so small that the professors have a chance to get to know you. So one of my biggest recommendations while you're here at the King's University is get to know your professors. Ask them all the questions you can think of. Good questions though, please. And just really be in the forefront. Let them know that you're there, that you're engaged in what you're learning, and that you want to know more. It's one of the best ways to become a successful student is to ask questions and to interact with your professor. All right. Citing sources. It's one of my favorite topics, citing sources. Be sure to include citations on all of your academic products. Unfortunately, in a study conducted by Howard, Service, and Rodriguez in 2010, it was found that 94% of papers reviewed did not cite a source information that was clearly not common knowledge. Now, here's a little word to the wise. Common knowledge is something that you can find in many different sources. So, for example, the date of Abraham Lincoln's death. You can find that date in many encyclopedias. You can find it online. You can find it in many biographies that have been written about Abraham Lincoln. You can find it in many history books. That is what is known as common information, common knowledge. So actually, you don't have to cite that information. You can just write Abraham Lincoln's death happened in this date, and you don't have to cite it because it's common knowledge. If you have any questions about whether information is common knowledge or not, please ask your professor or send an email to library@tku.edu, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, make sure that you cite all information that you take out of any source. Paraphrasing and direct quotation. What are these things? Well, direct quotations is when you take a sentence or a portion of a book, word for word, out of the source, and you put quotation marks around it and put it in your paper. That is a direct quotation. It's a quotation that comes directly out of the book, same words, same everything. Otherwise, you would be doing a paraphrase, and paraphrase is generally what you are doing more than direct quotation, because professors want to see that you understand the main idea of an entire work. So for example, if you were reading a book and you wanted to add some information into your paper, you would probably be summing up a large amount of information. You usually don't want to paraphrase just a sentence, because that would be unnecessary, and you would just, if it was just a sentence, you would just use direct quotation. You would take it word for word and put in with quotation marks. A paraphrase comes when you want to sum up a whole book or a chapter of a book, a large portion. So you take the main idea and you put it in your own words. Now remember, this is not taking a sentence out of a book and changing a few words. This is taking a general idea out of a whole chapter or a whole book portion of a source and summing it up in your own words. Remember, it's plagiarism to just take a few words and change them, but essentially take the whole sentence out of a book and use it as your own. All right, so when we are talking about paraphrasing and direct quotation, we need to remember to cite all ideas unless they are considered common knowledge. That means that most people would know the information. If you are using someone else's exact words or direct quotation, make sure to use quotation marks. Always cite the source whenever you are paraphrasing someone else's thoughts or ideas. So remember, even when you paraphrase, you do need to cite that work. All right. right, I am going to stop that share. And I am actually going to switch over to another PowerPoint that I have. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about TKU's academic integrity standard. Again, this is written in every syllabus that we hand out. So if you don't remember or get confused, you can refer to any syllabus you have received. Now, it's important to remember before I introduce this information that I'm not giving this to you to make you afraid. It's not to scare you. We just want to maintain academic integrity at TKU. So we want you to just be aware. Your professors are always here to help you. They want to help you. So remember to ask questions if you have any questions. They want to talk to you and help you. All right, this is another definition of plagiarism. It's really long and you can go through it and read it if you'd like. Essentially, it is using any information from someone else and putting your own name on it, or using your own information that already has received a grade and using it again for another grade. Also at TKU, we have a responsibility to promote academic integrity at TKU by not participating in or facilitating others' participation in any act of academic dishonesty, and by reporting all violations or suspected violations to the academic integrity standard to their instructors. Intellectual responsibility applies to all work done by students. So it's just something to keep in mind. If a fellow student asks you to participate in something that you find questionable, it is always your right to say, you know, let's talk to the professor and find out this is okay. I want to help you. I want to be helpful. I want to be your friend. But I also want to be academically integrous. All right, here's some examples of what might not be integrous activity. Here's what I talked about before, doing academic exercises that are meant to be individually completed, but instead you do them as a group. For instance, if you were to have your friend sitting next to you while you're taking a quiz on Blackboard, that wouldn't be integrous. Another one that happens a lot is if a professor says this is no book test, you can't use your books, but you're in Blackboard and you're on your own and you decide, I can't remember, I'm just going to use my books anyway. That's obviously cheating and is not allowed. Unauthorized aid. So depending on the aid of sources beyond those authorized by the instructor in writing papers, preparing reports, or solving problems. So obviously an example of that is if you were to order a paper from, say, an illicit website selling papers written by other people and putting your name on it. That would be an example of plagiarism and cheating. So please don't do that. Using another student's work, even if it's not your own. So if you write a paper in the first year and you want to use it again, you have to cite yourself. Or if you have read a paper that another student has written and submitted maybe even in a different university and use that work as your own, just change your name on it, that is also plagiarism. So please don't do that. Here's an obvious one. Acquiring tests or other academic material belonging to a faculty member, staff member, or another student without express permission. Please, ladies and gents, don't break into TKU after hours and go in your teacher's desk and find the answer quiz. That would be cheating and not academically integrous at all. This is continuing to write after the time has been called on a quiz or test examination on Blackboard, or even if you're doing it yourself, or maybe even your professor has allowed you to take a test in the library and you decide to sit in the back and you decide, he said an hour, but an hour and 15 minutes will be fine. Please remember that God is always watching. And this, I am going to harp on this one more time. Submitting substantially the same work for credit in more than one class, except with prior approval of the instructor, is cheating. So if you write a paper previously, you cannot recycle the material later on if it's already received a grade previously. You can talk to your professor about using that information and adding to it in a current paper, but remember, always ask your professor first. Be integrous researchers. So this applies mostly to the master's and doctoral students. Sometimes for our studies, we will take classes where we have to do studies. So we have to ask questions and receive information, process that information, and put it back out in papers and reports. If I got to the end of a project that may have taken me months or years and decide, I forgot to do this one little calculation. I forgot to figure out that information. You know what? I'll just fudge it. I'll just put in some numbers that'll be close. That would be not the correct way to do things. And that actually called falsification, which is altering or fabricating any information or citation in academic exercise or activity. Also, I want to make you aware of a tool that's in Blackboard. Sometimes when you submit a paper, the professor will tell Blackboard to make you click a little box that's called Safe Assign. And what that tool does is it takes your paper that you submit and compares it to other information that's all over the internet or in materials of reference materials or books, or, because most books are on the internet somewhere. And it gives the professor a report of how much material you have actually used. It will even highlight information that is borrowed or taken from directly off the internet or out of books, and it will highlight it and give that information to the professor. So if you take Wikipedia information and you just copy and paste it and plug it into your paper, your professor will be able to tell and will be able to tell easily. Safe Assign also has a feature where you can actually see this information too after your paper has been graded. So I highly suggest that you take a look at that information one time after your paper has been graded and take a look at what the professor is actually seeing when you submit a paper using Safe Assign, just so you can know in future what it looks like to the professor. All right, thank you for joining me for this little conversation about plagiarism. Remember, if you have any more questions or you have any suggestions or ways we can help you in the future, please do not hesitate to contact us at Student Success or at the library, which is easy to contact us. You can just email to library@tku.edu or give us a call or come on by and say hi. I want to see everyone and hear everyone's questions. So God bless you and get some A's out there. All right.